Welcome to Profit Talks. Since I've been doing these videos for quite some time now, I decided to give them some structure. So we got a new name, a new format, and also a new timeline, because starting today, I will drop those videos every week, somewhere between Friday and Sunday. And unless I have something special to show you or some guests to invite and to talk with, in those videos, I will go through a couple of the most volatile geopolitical and political markets of the week. I will give you the context on what moved the odds and what piece of information changed the perception of the traders in this market. So today is February 8th, 2026. We've got a beautiful Sunday morning, and I want to talk to you about the Fed markets, the Iran deal markets, the Greenland deal markets, and the UK politics, and more importantly, Keir Starmer. So jumping straight into it, the first market I want to talk to you about is the Fed market, and more specifically, it's Stephen Mirin that surprisingly left the Trump cabinet, his position as chair of Council of Economic Advisors, to remain at the Fed for the longer term. Here, it really surprised a lot of traders because the understanding was that Stephen Mirin will leave the Fed to still be the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors to make room for the new chair nominee, which is Kevin Warsh. Because the Trump administration was supposedly uncertain, Jerome Powell will leave the board once his term ends. As you see, the market is also not very convinced. We have only 66% chance Jerome Powell will be out of the Fed board by the end of May. To give you some context, it is generally customary for Fed chairs to leave the board entirely once their term ends. In Powell's case, his term as a chair ends, I think it's 18th of May, so it's somewhere mid-May, while his term as the governor ends in 2028. So the Trump administration generally thought that Powell, just because there was a lot of pressure on him and the Fed in general, might stick it to Trump and stay on the board up until 2028. That was the general understanding. That was the base case since last year, I think. But now, with this Stephen Mirin move, that pretty much surprised everyone because everyone pretty much thought that the first people out of the Trump cabinet would be either Kristi Noem, just because she's the head of DHS, and DHS is responsible for the whole Minnesota situation, which is pretty bad if you ask anyone on the left or right. Or that it would be Pam Bondi, just because of her handling of the Epstein files. But it's Stephen Mirin, and at least for me it signals that if Mirin, who is the architect of Trump's tariff policy and the overall economic policy, so it's an important person. So if he is to stay at the Fed, then at least my understanding is that Scott Bessent believes that Powell will make no problems. I will just leave the board once his term as chair is done. Because otherwise there will be a lot of issues of reconfirming Mirin as the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, still the confirmation of Kevin Warsh as the Fed governor. This would be a lot of trouble, and this move so early into the year, because we've got February 8th, is, for me at least, an indication that this market on Jerome Powell is pretty underpriced. This is not financial advice. As always, do your own research. This is only my opinions on global events and the chances of them happening. But if you ask me today, I would say there's probably closer to 80% chance that Jerome Powell is out of Fed board by the end of May versus the 66 we have here. Just because Stephen Mirin is now committed to the Fed. I think this important piece of information is not been really priced in by traders. I'm not exactly sure why. Like, maybe if you go, so the market moved here on February 4th, and February 4th we had 60% chance. Now I've got 67. Like, no, that's not really that much of a move, especially since I believe this should be in the 80s. So that's just one observation about the markets that I have. There are so many markets right now in poly market that it's pretty logical that some of the moves will only be noticed later on. And I think that's the logical conclusion. But when we are on the Powell market, I also think that then if the MAI 30 is at 80%, then December 31st, 2026 should be probably at 90 at this point. Like this is like May 30, we might have some delays here and there because it's really close. But December 31st, that's a no-brainer. At least in the current context. Okay, but that's about the Fed. I don't really want to spend too much time on the Fed because I do feel that starting probably May or even June, we will get a lot of opportunities to talk about the Fed, the monetary policy, how low or how high can the rates go, and we will definitely have a very different discussion to what we had, for example, last year. So moving ahead, I also wanted to talk about US and Iran deal. I don't really think there is a point in talking too much about the Friday meeting. The two delegations met. They supposedly met very briefly face to face, and then they were talking through mediator, which is Oman. Obviously, they didn't agree too much. There are no real developments that are presented to us in the media. But we do know that both sides want to meet once again. So obviously there is a room to negotiate. We also, at least I also know that these talks were happening beforehand. They were not official, but since we have official rounds, that should mean that there is at least some path to compromise. We'll see what happens. I have my theory that is laid out in my Substack in the second, in the first update on the Iran situation, because my initial thesis was that we will get the talks. This was somewhere in mid-January when this market was around 30% chance that we'll have the talks. I think that a lot of traders really slept on this market, but I think also poly market slept on it because it didn't really have a lot of liquidity rewards back then. I think it was only around 30K in volume, and this 1.5 million that followed, this happened mostly here. So there was a lot of trading opportunity on this market. I think there's a wasted opportunity for Signal. Yeah, as you can see, in geopolitics, which is a very difficult topic when it comes to understanding it, and even more difficult when it comes to trading it, there are a lot of markets that will be mispriced, and there will be opportunities to actually move the odds, to move them closer to fair value. This is the prime example. I think the whole situation is a bit misleading. There's a lot of propaganda in the media when it comes to Iran and what is happening there. I think the situation is more and less complex that is being presented at the same time, which is pretty funny. But yeah, that's what happens when media just peddle whatever information they're given without trying to verify it, without trying to ask the main important questions, and instead just going with the first rumor they hear. I think it's really bad. It makes the geopolitical discourse in the media and social media and between people very difficult, very almost impossible in my opinion. So yeah, at least we have the markets to counter these narratives a bit, and I do hope that me giving you context also on the moves is also helping you to understand what is actually happening versus just reading all the rumors we got in the media. So that's about Iran. I think Iran will be a topic over the next at least few Profit Talks episodes. We'll surely get a lot more rumors, maybe some signal here and there. So yeah, make sure to check out my Substack where I laid out my thesis on what will happen, and we'll see. We'll see. Moving next, we have Greenland, and I think this market is interesting, not because it moved significantly in either direction, and not because we heard something new in the media some new rumor or whatever. I think it's interesting because there was no rumor at all, and despite trending upwards, especially after Davos, uh, then suddenly around February 4th, the market really tanked. It was tanked like 15% down. It stabilized somewhere around 60. But I think there is a clear thesis on why that happened, and the thesis is very simple. The thesis is that European governments are extremely slow when it comes to bureaucracy, and when it comes to Greenland, Denmark will be even slower because this change in the agreement that was negotiated supposedly with Mark Rutte in Davos, first it needs to be finalized. Like what Trump and Rutte discussed, this was the framework of a new deal or an amended deal. Now all the clauses need to be negotiated. It will take some time because this is a trilateral negotiation between the US, Denmark, and Greenland, which is semi-autonomous. Then the final body of the deal, before it can be signed and ratified, it needs to go through Danish parliament and then Greenland parliament. And I think I also read somewhere it needs to go through Greenland people themselves. So as you can imagine, each of those votes will take time, preparation, some haggling probably with some politicians, to push things forward. So there's a pretty high chance it's a long process. I know we are only in February and there's a lot of time till the end of December, but it's not that of an important topic. It's not something that Trump can really push forward because it's entirely dependent on the Danish political process. It's not like there are some parties that disagree, just you can push them forward like in some ceasefire situation. So this is probably a sharp trader or a few sharper traders that realized the situation is not as simple as presented and just put money where the thoughts are. So yeah, this is Greenland. I don't think we'll hear a lot about Greenland in the coming weeks. This will be negotiated in silence, and probably somewhere in the summer we might hear again about some progress being made there. All right, and moving to the last market, on between this February 4th and 5th, we saw a massive increase in Starmer out by end of June chances going up. So you may ask why a market that was trending around 20% and going lower and lower every day suddenly shot up. And the simple answer is Epstein files. So there are, at least till now, no consequences for anyone in America when it comes to Epstein. But when it comes to Great Britain, there is this BBC article that explains pretty neatly what happened, because in those docs that were published by the DOJ in the US, it turned out that Lord Mandelson, who is a UK's ambassador to the US, was very closely connected to Jeffrey Epstein, was his close friend, and scandal erupted in the UK. So the politicians demanded that some documents connected to the appointment of the Lord should be published, and the traders realized there's a lot of risk that it may somehow implicate Keir Starmer into it, that he knew, or he didn't care, or he was also friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And since Keir Starmer has already a lot of troubles because he's not very well liked, he has problems with migration, and he is looking at Reform UK breathing down his neck and gaining ground every single day in every single constituency. So this definitely increased his odds of going out in the near term. And as BBC lays out here, this is not the only problem, because even if Keir Starmer somehow manages to go out of the Epstein scandal as a prime minister, then he also got a by-election at the end of February, where he's looking at the defeat to Greens and Reform UK. and he is looking at elections in Scotland, Wales, and English councils, where his situation, or his party's situation, the Labour Party, is not exactly great as well, because they are also find themselves behind regional parties as well as Reform UK. So Keir Starmer has definitely issues. Great Britain as a country also has issues pretty much since it left the EU. But probably what we can expect here in the future is Reform UK gaining a lot of ground and gaining a lot of power, even if they don't manage to rule independently. They will be a force to reckon with, and this is something we can notice all across Europe, right? Because we have Reform UK in UK, we have Vox in Spain, we have Chega in Portugal, we have the National Front in France, we have AfD in Germany, we have Confederacja in Poland. Like pretty much every major country, like in Italy, the alt-right already leads. So pretty much in every country in the EU, we have a new right or an alt-right party that is strong, getting stronger, and possibly even getting the pole position in the next election cycle. And things like that, so scandals that can usher things forward, are important when it comes to migration crisis, are important when it comes to the Ukraine war. So I think it's also important to understand when the odds show up that much on regional politics or domestic politics in different countries. That's usually an event that can also have global consequences, as we can see here. Like, for example, a snap election in the UK will have massive consequences on the UK's relation with the US, on the UK's relation with Europe, on the treatment of migrants in Europe, and also on how the Ukraine war may go. All right, and I think that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed my commentary on the global events this week. If you want to see more of my content, then take a look at my X and Profit Notes, at Profit Notes. Look at profitnotes.com for my Substack, and also like and subscribe here on YouTube if you want to hear my summaries and commentary on a weekly basis. Thank you all, and see you on those other platforms, and see you next week here for another round of Profit Talks.